This episode of the Creep Street Podcast is brought to you by Martini Coffee Roasters. You know, people always look at me weird when I say I start off every morning with a big old martini. But then I set them straight, and I tell them I'm talking about Martini Coffee Roasters coffee. A delicious coffee made by the Martini family. They roast their coffee using a traditional method of sight and sound to roast those little babies to perfection. And they also sell green coffee beans for those home roasters out there. And right now, fans of the Creep Street Podcast can get 20% off their entire order by using the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Once again, for 20% off your order, use the code CREEPSTREET at martinicoffee.com. Martini Coffee Roasters, the perfect coffee to keep you creeps caffeinated.
You've taken a wrong turn down Creep Street.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Maureen Bogey.
And I'm Dylan Hackworth.
And you are listening to the Creep Street Podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We are going to have an absolute dang blast. To get some updates on the Creep Street Podcast and just to see what we're up to and what we've got cooking, feel free to check us out on Instagram at Creep Street Podcast. On Twitter, we're at Creep Street Pod. We're also on Facebook. And if you have any episode suggestions for us, feel free to DM us on any of those social media platforms, or you can email us directly at creepstreetpodcast@gmail.com. However, if this is not enough for you, if one episode a week is just not cutting it, you guys, we have a solution. Don't freak out. It's gonna be okay because we have a Patreon, okay? We have a Patreon where you can check out some great bonus content. We have some fun little shorter bonus goodies. We have full bonus episodes, movie commentary, articles, lots of fun stuff. So to check that out, you can go over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast. And speaking of Patreon, Dylan, will you please list off our top-tier donors?
Here they come. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Alungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Vivacious Vicky McHugh, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the Oh-So-Suave Sean Richardson, the British Bone Breaker Bex Martin, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool, Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude, Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand, Noeline Vivilli, the Leviathan Levi Mace, and the Loathsome Johnny Love.
Oh my gosh, those names are just healing. They are high vibrations. They just are everything we need. And thank you so much for listing off those incredible names.
That's right. And I have a couple shout-outs real quick.
Yes, we do.
Up front, I want to give a shout-out to Sam Kiker. He shared in our Citizens of the Milky Way forum. I didn't know this, because as we know on our last episode, we talked about how many Pokemon are inspired by yokai.
Yes.
One I didn't realize, Sableye, this is what he wrote. Sableye is a Pokemon based on the mythical creatures of the Kelly Hopkinsville encounter.
Yes.
Which is a very influential case on this podcast. We have not done it yet.
Yes.
But we always talk about Hellier. If you've ever watched Hellier, please, it's free. It's on YouTube. It's on Amazon. Go watch that. So thank you, Sam. I did not know that. Very cool.
And that's cool too, because that's a Pokemon that was inspired by an American thing, you know. So it's like that's one that isn't a yokai background necessarily, but still has those yokai vibes.
And also Maui Reyes, our friend in the Philippines, she emailed us very much like the wedding ceremony. We talked about how when foxes get married, that's when you would see those odd, on a sunny day, how sometimes you get patches of rain.
Yes.
Like that would come from that. In Filipino folklore, when that happens, a tikbalang is getting married. And in tikbalang, she says, are half man, half horses. Very much like a centaur. So very cool stuff. Yeah. And I think you had one.
Yes. And I love that because that goes perfectly with my update, my shout out on our Instagram account. We heard from the Geekest lovely account on Instagram, aka Ernst. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. He is from South Africa, and he said that they have a similar saying saying in Afrikaans, but what it means is the fox is marrying the wolf's wife.
Very interesting.
And it's at the same time when, you know, it's like sunny but also rainy or whatever.
Right.
So I just think that's so cool. I mean, places that are so far away from each other.
Absolutely.
I mean, not necessarily the Philippines and Japan, but, you know, Japan and
South Africa absolutely are very far apart. Right. And they have a similar, that's really cool.
I think that's so interesting. And so we're so glad that people are enjoying the yokai episode. We really enjoyed making it. So yeah, please reach out. Let us know what's your favorite yokai or what are some of your favorite yokai. And maybe we'll do another episode or we'll do maybe a YouTube video or something about top 10 scariest yokai or cutest yokai or whatever. So Dylan, tell us what is going on in the United States of America.
This week we are talking about the Villisca Axe Murders. And really quick, let me give you my sources. First, I read a book called Villisca by Roy Marshall. Next, I read an article called The Axe Murder Who Got Away by Mike Dash at Smithsonian Magazine.
Kind of gives it away, but okay.
The Villisca Axe Murder by Jody Ewing at iowacoldcases.org. And Cursed Axe Murder House Tries to Claim Another Victim by Paul Seaburn at Mysterious Universe. Oh boy.
Okay, by these headlines/titles, you know I'm excited.
Oh, this is a nasty one. This is nasty.
This is nasty. This is true crime.
This is nasty.
Full
true crime.
blown.
This is full blown, unsolved, nasty. And I'm going to be honest, the crime scene is a bit ugly.
Yes.
I'll give you a little heads up before I start describing the layabout of everything. This is one of the most brutal unsolved murders in American history. We're going to get into it today. So in one night of violence, 8 people died with no reason why and no idea who did it. Now, you're going to see a lot of similarities to other cases like Amityville, Cabin 28, Hinterkaifeck. It's very much in that vein.
Yes, okay.
So let's start at the beginning.
That's a very good place to start.
The story takes place in June of 1912 in the small town in southwest Iowa called Villisca. Now, today the population of Villisca sits somewhere between 1,100 and 1,200 people, but it wasn't much bigger back in 1912. I think max, they think it was about 2,000 people. So very small town. The locals were all very friendly to each other. Everyone kind of recognized, even if you didn't know someone personally, because it's such a small town, you at least knew someone by sight.
Yeah, everyone was, you know, kind of aware of everyone and all that.
And if you didn't know them personally, maybe you knew them at church or, you know, something like that, or they worked at one of the shops.
Everyone had like a mutual friend.
Exactly. Well, this story centers around the Moore family. Josiah is the father. We'll just call him Joe Moore. I think most people called him Joe.
Nice.
Joe and Sarah Moore, they were the parents. They were described as affluent and very well-liked couple about town.
Oh, great.
And they had 4 children. Herman, aged 11, Catherine, aged 10, Boyd, aged 7, and the youngest Paul at age 5.
Well, this is cute. As of right now, I mean, it sounds nice.
Oh.
I wish this was the end.
Oh, no. So it's the evening of Sunday, June 9th, and the family is headed toward the local Presbyterian church. You see, the family was quite active there, and Sarah was actually in charge of their special Children's Day service, which was happening that night.
Oh, very nice.
And I guess this Children's Day service, it was an annual thing they would do at the end of every school year to kind of celebrate the kids for doing great at school and kind of welcoming in the summer. You know, they would do like little plays or read from the Bible.
Yeah.
You know, just, it was a special day for the kids at church.
It sounds cute.
Now, accompanying them that evening, they had a neighbor family, the Stillingers they were very close with, and their daughters were friends with the Moore's daughter, Catherine. And so they were going to attend the service that evening with them and then stay the night with the Moores. So that was Lena and Ina Stillinger. Lena was 12 and Ina, age 8. Like I said, both friends with Catherine. So the Moores and their 2 guests, they went out to church. And they were there with friends and family that night. It was a very happy evening. Everyone was very excited about summer and everything, and that school was out. So afterwards, I guess after the service, there was a bit of mingling and food and stuff like that. And I guess this evening, it was kind of a cloudy, damp evening and kind of cool for the time of year it was. It was a little chilly that night. And when they left the church at around 9:30 p.m., that would be the last time any of them would be seen alive.
Oh no. Oh my God. This is one of those times where it's like, you of course feel terrible for the family that it's their actual house. But there's just on top of it too, when people are there that don't live there, like it's just such a weird coincidence that you just happen to be spending the night. Those two girls, oh God, I'm sure for their family or their parents, it must just be so hard.
Much like Cabin 28. That one kid, you know, and it just happened to be the night she was hanging out with her friend. You
yes,
know?
Yeah.
And it says the family went home very happy, and before they went to bed, they had milk and cookies. So they were really happy. So even once they got home, they stayed up a little later and played around, had milk and cookies. So it was a very happy evening.
Oh.
So now it's the morning of June 10th. It's Monday, 1912. And the Moores, they had a neighbor, the elderly Mrs. Mary Peckham. She had been up for a few hours. You know, this is 1912. Everyone there had a farm. Even the Moores had a farm with cattle and all that stuff. So people get up early.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? They get up early because they got to do shit around the farm, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Well, she was hanging laundry and stuff, and after a few hours, after it got to be about 7:30 a.m., she noticed there seemed to be no stirring at the Moore house. She would actually tell investigators later that it was an eerie, dead-like silence. You know, usually by this time, at least Joe would be up, because like I said, or the kids would be up too, outside either playing or doing chores. Once it got to be about 8 o'clock, you know, she could hear the cattle lowing because the cattle wanted to be milked. She walked over and knocked on the door. Didn't get a response. And she also felt bad. She didn't want to be nosy. She also didn't want to come across like the nosy busybody across the street. So she also was, but she was kind of concerned.
Like, this is very odd.
Right.
And like you said, with the cattle and stuff, you can't, it's really not an option to just be like, we're going to sleep in today.
Right.
So something is not right.
Something's not right. So she even takes care of the chickens, I guess, does a few of the things.
Oh, bless her.
She calls up the local druggist, who is Ross Moore, who's the brother of Joe. And, you know, she was like, hey, Ross, you know, something's weird. You know, no one's up by this time. And Ross, he had a key himself. The key, you know, just in case if the family ever needed an extra key, he carried one with him. So he goes, okay, well, I'll come out there and see what's up. So it's about 8 a.m. She calls Ross. He comes over. Ross goes up to the door, unlocks it, and it says Ross barely entered the house before he came rushing back outside.
Oh, no.
On his face was a look of utter shock and horror. He immediately told Mary to call the police marshal. So she did. Within a half an hour, Marshal Hank Horton had arrived on the scene, and along with him were a Dr. J. Clark Cooper, as well as an Edgar Hoe and a Wesley Ewing, who was the minister at the local Presbyterian church. Not long after the county coroner, a man named L.A. Lindquist, arrived as well. He was followed by a third doctor named F.S. Williams, Dr. Williams. And the doctor, F.S. Williams, he was the first one to officially look at the bodies and estimate their time of death. And it says when Dr. Williams emerged from the house, he was pale.
Oh,
and
God.
visibly shaken. And by now, a huge crowd, because word had gotten around, because it's a small town, and a crowd started to build up around the house. And apparently, Dr. Williams said to the crowd, "Don't go in there, boys. You'll regret it until the last day of your life." Okay.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Little word of warning, I'm about to get into the crime scene here.
Yeah.
Buckle up. It involves kids getting hurt. It's just ugly stuff. So this is what they think happened. They believe that shortly after midnight on June 10th, the killer or killers, carrying an axe, entered through the back door. Now, much like Axeman in New Orleans, we found out in this era, axe murders were very common. It's because everyone had one. And in fact, the axe that was used, they believe, was actually Joe's from the coal shed.
Yeah, and growing up, you know, you always hear stories or, you know, horror stories or true crime stories about axe murders. And I really never thought about, like, exactly why. I just would always be like, that's so weird. Like, what do you mean? Like, why would, like, axe murder? Like, why would you do that?
Right.
And but it's like, it just was so different back then. It was just like the weapon that was just always there. Right. As we'll see here, it's a very physically demanding way to kill someone.
So like I said, axe in hand, they believe he entered on the first floor, the back door, just after midnight on June 10th, 1912. It was not uncommon for doors to be unlocked in this town, as you can imagine. Small town, everyone knew each other. And next, the killer took an oil lamp from the dresser and bent the wick in order to keep the flame low. And then once they lit it, they turned the lamp down so low that it barely gave off any light at all. It would have been just enough for them to maneuver through the house. Now, with the oil lamp in one hand and the axe in the other, the killer made his way through the first floor and would have passed right by where Lena and Ina Stillinger were sleeping, because they were sleeping on the first floor in the bedroom. The killer would have actually seen them and passed by them. And then he makes his way up the narrow staircase to the second floor. And next he would have passed by the room which the 4 more children were sleeping. Didn't go in, passed right by. The first room the killer chose was the room of the 43-year-old Joe and his wife, Sarah.
Okay.
In the dim light of the oil lamp, the killer stood over the sleeping Joe and Sarah, and lifting the axe high in the air, he brought it down first on the back of Joe's skull, crushing it instantly and killing him. They think it killed him instantly.
Okay,
crushed his skull.
That's one kindness, I guess.
Somehow Sarah did not wake up, because next the killer killed her. Now, consider this. Not only was there someone next to her being killed with an axe and she didn't wake up, it says there was gouges in the ceiling from the lift of when the killer would have lifted the axe to bring it down. He was hitting the ceiling. So you got to think, this bastard's whipping this thing. Somehow she doesn't wake up. No one else in the house wakes up.
That makes no logical sense. You know what I mean? Like, there's no way that could even happen. Like, that just literally cannot happen. We'll get into theories and stuff like that later, but like, it would be so fucking loud.
Exactly. Next, the killer went to the nearby room where the Moore children were.
Oh, God.
All 4 of them he killed with an axe. Once again, evidence suggests that not a single one of them woke up.
Wow. Yeah, what the fuck?
That means if you were the 4th person in that room to die, there were 3 people killed with an axe before you.
Right.
That you didn't wake up from.
I mean, that's crazy. How could, as well as the parents being murdered in a room not far away either.
Right.
And like what you were saying too, that there were gouges in the ceiling from the lift of the axe. Like, that itself must have been so loud.
Exactly.
I'm sure this murderer is like huffing and puffing too.
Right.
It's just wild.
So now 6 of the 8 people in this house are dead.
Oh, God.
The killer then made his way downstairs, and then both Lana and Ina were murdered next. Now, what's weird is that there is evidence that Lana woke up while her sister was being killed.
Okay.
The body was laying sideways across the bed, almost as if she'd been struggling, and her nightgown was lifted up, and she didn't have any underwear on.
Fuck.
They think that whoever it was tried to sexually assault her, but there was no evidence that he was successful. So they think for whatever reason he decided, screw it, and just killed her.
Okay.
But it's like, how did the last girl wake up?
She was the only one. Yeah, that is very, very odd. And that happened with Amityville. That happened when they think that someone, Ronnie DeFeo's sister, might have woken up briefly before she was shot, but like, it's not really clear.
Exactly.
And I think it's come up with some other of these cases where it's like, okay, so one person might have woken up from the noise.
Exactly.
But what's the explanation for everyone else?
One. Yeah.
And I mean, it makes sense that the killer would go to the parents' room first.
Exactly.
Just, it's crazy that none of the kids heard anything except the one, but it seems like it was probably at the last minute she woke up. Like when her sister was being killed, maybe that woke her up, but none of the other noise from upstairs woke them up.
It's almost
crazy.
like it was meant for just the Moore family, and it's like for whatever reason the spell whatever kept them. I'm not saying that's what, but it's like whatever reason, whatever kept the others asleep. So it's almost like they weren't originally supposed to be a part of it.
Weird.
Now, it doesn't end there. Everything that happens next is what really makes this the mystery. Obviously, the horror of it is just awful, but this is what happens next is what makes this so just weird.
Yeah.
Next, the killer made his way back up the stairs with the axe to the bedroom of Joe and Sarah. Remember, all 8 people in the house are dead. The killer then used the axe to completely demolish the heads. They think he hit Joe 30 times.
Oh my God.
And also, weird note, the evidence suggested that before he used the blunt side, and they think that was actually a sign that the killer knew what he was doing, because to use the blade, it might get stuck.
Right.
But once they're dead, and so he just basically makes fucking goulash out of these.
Jesus Christ. So he killed them with the blunt side of the...
I'm assuming so.
And then afterwards
used the blade to like just make mush of them.
Oh my God. And this was for
the heads.
The parents?
No. He then went to the Moore's room, to the kids' room, and did the same to all 4 children.
What in the actual fuck?
And then went downstairs and did the same to the 2 Stillinger girls. girls.
Okay, so clearly, in my mind, this means that this is an emotional killing, and that this person who did it is really either trying to make a point, send a message, or is like so full of hate.
Right.
This isn't like a random...
It's like an animal.
It does, but it's more like calculated and more... I mean, obviously more calculated than an animal, but it's just, it doesn't necessarily even feel like it's just like chaos in there, you know? It feels so, at least in my opinion, like it feels so full of wrath, or if not wrath, then maybe it's so much pain in there or something. Like Lizzie Borden, that's another case that's like very, very interesting, more than just like the not nursery rhyme, but kind of nursery rhyme that we all know about it, but where killing someone or really like defacing or destroying the body, it's like that doesn't just a robbery or something like that. Even if it's a robbery gone wrong, that's not going to happen.
Next, the killer would use bedclothes to cover the faces, what was left of the faces, of Joe and Sarah. Likewise, the killer would use a gauze undershirt to cover Herman's face and a dress to cover the faces of Catherine, Boyd, and Paul. And then the killer went downstairs and did the same with the bodies of the Stillinger girls.
This also shows that he knows them.
And also, he then went around the entire house and covered every mirror and piece of glass with cloth as well.
That's sign of remorse. Probably he doesn't want to be able to see himself. That's definitely a possibility. Or maybe some sort of paranoia about, I don't know,
maybe some sort of like ritual thing. Right, maybe it's some sort of like old witch, like wives' tale. But the evidence would also indicate that the killer was in no rush to leave.
Why do they do this?
It seems that the killer casually toured the house, then also removed a 2-pound slab of bacon from the family's icebox, wrapped it in a towel, and just left it on the bedroom floor and on the first floor where the Stillinger girls were.
Why? That is very weird. But this is a thing, though, like the Miyazawa murders, the murderer just stayed in their house for a while. Hinterkaifeck, which really reminds me of this.
Yeah.
They stayed at the house for, I mean, that was even longer. They like took care of the animals and stuff. But like this idea of staying around and then also like using the family's resources, like you're either like eating their food or you're using their food, like, and then putting it in like a weird place or something. Like, and that's something that more modern killers have done too. Like I think the Golden State Killer did that. Richard Ramirez might have even done that. Yeah, it's just very weird.
Later, when investigators would go over the place, next to that slab of bacon was a piece of a keychain that they were able to determine was not from the Moore family. Also, they found a bowl of bloody water, and they think the killer maybe washed their hands before they left. But after hanging around the home for a few hours, the killer left the lamp burning lightly at the top of the stairs. It was almost as if, obviously, they would see the bodies on the first floor first. It was almost like the little lamp at the top was to say, like, oh, don't forget to check up here.
That's another thing that killers do when they know their victims, is that they do want them to be found.
And they believe that when the killer left, it was probably around 5 a.m., just when the sun would have been coming up, and just vanished into the morning. But they also found, because they searched the whole premises, obviously, in the barn, there was a depression in the hay, and right next to where it was like a hole in the barn wall where you could have looked right into the family's home. They think whoever it was followed them home and waited for a few hours, just watched the family from the barn.
Oh my God, that's so fucking creepy. That scares the freak out of my frock. Oh, I hate that like just that this man was just watching them and like also still on their property. It's just like such a violation.
So jump back to the present in terms of, it's now daytime, June 10th, 1912, and the investigation's going on.
Okay.
Remember, the doctor came out and was like, nobody go in.
Right.
Well, much like a lot of the stories we cover, how this case was handled was bullshit.
Oh my
like, they left the house unattended at first while they were waiting. And even though the doctor said no one go in there, they think at least 100 townsfolk went through the house.
Oh, yeah.
Were taking someone took a chunk of Joe Moore's skull.
Oh my God.
And keep in mind, this was like a well-liked person.
Like, why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Like, oh, old Joe would have wanted me to have this. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want that for?
And what are you gonna do with it? You're just gonna be like, hey, this is a part of my, like, someone I vaguely knew dude's skull.
Yeah.
It's like, what in the actual hell? But I gotta say, though, that the reverend or minister should not have said that, because being like...
Oh, the doctor, you mean?
Or the doctor, like, no man or should come and see and what about it? Like, that's basically makes everyone just want to go in there more.
Exactly.
Just don't say anything. That is what I have learned from researching all of these things for this podcast, is don't make any sort of statements to the press or to the squad when you just are finding out about it. You gotta do the research first, get the intel, get your mind wrapped around it, and then you can tell the squad. But you can't do it first, because then the squad is gonna get crazy.
Amen.
And they're gonna get up all in the damn crime scene.
Amen.
I mean, now not as much, but they still kind of can fuck it up.
So people are
God.
coming and going, shit like that.
Just ruining
like
the damn
stepping
crime
in blood.
scene. Good Lord.
Think about it. We also know between when the killer left to when the bodies were discovered, it had been a few hours.
Right.
So if they were a local townsperson, they would have had plenty of time to go back home, get rid of any bloody clothes, anything like that. Even if they had decided to skip town, there was a very active train station in Villisca that saw around 30 trains come and go a day.
Oh my God.
They could have easily just hopped on one of those.
Oh, yeah.
So even if the killer wasn't even a townsperson, they could have come during the night and left without anyone knowing.
And no one would know, yeah. Oh my God, the past was scary, guys.
Bloodhounds were even brought out, but obviously nothing could be found. But they said by nightfall on June 10th, in Villisca and the surrounding areas, not a single dog could be found to buy, because everyone bought a fucking dog.
Oh, really?
Everyone had a dog. Let's talk suspects. Let's talk sussies.
Okay, that sounds like kind of fun and cute, I guess.
Because we got two big stinkers of suspects here.
Yikes.
Two guys that, especially one. But so the first suspect was a guy named Frank Jones. And Frank, he was a very well-known businessman about the town, and he also happened to be an Iowa state senator.
Oh, okay.
He had an ongoing beef with Joe Moore. Aside from being a businessman and a politician, Frank was also a very prominent member in the Methodist church there in town.
Okay.
And when these murders happened, it kind of caused a rift in the town between the Presbyterian and the Methodist community.
Oh.
Because the Methodists were like, no way Frank did this, Frank Jones. And all the people that went to church with Joe were like, I bet it was that motherfucker. You
They're
know
like
what I mean?
seeking justice. They're like, we need someone's head.
Each side was convinced of either Frank's guilt or innocence, depending on where they went to church.
Oh, gosh.
So why this beef? Well, there's two very interesting reasons why Joe and Frank didn't like each other.
Okay, go on.
You see, years before, Joe worked for Frank Jones at his business, and Joe quickly became Frank's star salesman. He was a natural at it.
Okay.
But apparently Frank also insisted that Joe work from 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. 6 days a week.
Good Lord.
And Joe wasn't so keen on that.
Yeah.
So Joe would leave in 1907 to form his own rival business, and when he left, he took with him their biggest client, John Deere. So Frank was very pissed about that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but business is business,
Business
baby.
is
You gotta
business, baby.
treat your employees well. If not, they're gonna pop off and just do their own thing.
Also, Frank had a daughter-in-law that was often the center of town gossip.
Oh.
She was apparently a very lovely woman, and there were many rumors about her having numerous affairs with men about town. And of
Yikes.
course, there was a rumor that Joe Moore had an affair with Frank's daughter-in-law. But regardless if Frank actually had this affair or not, they really truly did have a strong disdain for one another.
Wow.
And it said that if they were to see each other coming on the sidewalk, they would cross the street to avoid. And like in a small town like that, it
Yeah.
becomes new. Like
That's some petty behavior.
exactly.
For grown-ass men. You're like, they clearly were not on the same page.
And here's a good point. The people that were convinced it was Frank also knew, hey, this guy's a politician, he's a businessman. If he did it, he's probably not going to do it himself.
Right.
He's not above hiring someone to do it. One of the detectives working on the case was a guy named James Wilkerson, and he was convinced of this theory that it was Frank Jones and that he had paid someone to do it. And he was actually able to be a big enough thorn in Frank's side that he was actually able to keep him from winning re-election.
Wow.
In 1916, he made a formal announcement that Frank Jones had hired a man named William Mansfield to do the killings. He was even able to take it far enough that a grand jury was assembled to overlook the evidence, but it turned out to be a dead end. Payroll records showed that Mansfield was in fact 100 miles away working in Illinois at the time of the murders.
Okay.
One of the sources actually said that when news first hit and everyone was gathered around outside, that Frank did stop by the house. He didn't go in or anything, but he apparently said some nice words to Ross, just like some words of comfort. So, which could mean anything. I mean, it could also just be because he's a local, It's
Right.
what you do when you're a politician. You shake hands, kiss babies, all that stuff.
Do the dang thing.
But let's talk about this second suspect, because this guy is fucking insane.
Oh, yikes. Okay, let's do it.
When you hear the story, it'll make sense. This other guy was an individual named Lynn George Jacqueline Kelly. And Kelly was actually a traveling Methodist minister who had immigrated from England. And at first, it was easy to dismiss him as a suspect because the guy apparently was only 5'2" and 119 pounds.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
Plus, the Moores were Presbyterian. Why would he have bumped into it? It's not even like he would have bumped into a church
Right.
if he was a Methodist. You know?
Right. I have a feeling there's gonna be some more information.
Well, apparently Kelly had a history of mental illness and sexual deviancy.
Yikes.
Likewise, he was left-handed, and investigators were able to determine from the blood splatter that the killer was left-handed.
Oh.
Obviously, that doesn't mean just because you're left-handed doesn't mean much, but listen
I mean-
to this. Kelly immigrated to the U.S. in 1904 with his wife, and since then had been traveling, like I said, as a Methodist minister to places like North Dakota, Minnesota, and in the days before the murders, Kelly had been ministering in communities that were just north of Villisca.
Oh.
And on the morning of Sunday, June 9th, Kelly arrived by train in Villisca. And here's where it gets weird. Kelly was in attendance at that children's service that evening.
Oh, God. Why?
And the next morning, he was seen leaving by train at 5:19 a.m.
Yeah, it's this guy.
And an elderly couple who bumped into him said that Kelly had told them something had happened, a horrible murder happened back in Villisca. This was 3 hours before the bodies were even discovered.
Oh, God.
But here's the other, obviously how would he know that? That's the main elephant. But
Right.
think about this. Why would he be sitting in a Presbyterian church? He's a Methodist minister.
And why was he at, like, this Children's Day thing? I mean, I know it was, like, for the, like, community. I'm sure, like, anyone could go. But it's like, if you are not from this town...
Right.
And this isn't your religion and your children aren't there, or I don't even know if he has kids. Why are you going to this event?
Right. I mean, obviously, just because you're one faith doesn't mean you can't attend a service, but it's just like, why would
like,
he be
why
at the
would you,
There's a
though?
Methodist church in town. Why wouldn't he be at that one?
It's just kind of like, why is this even going on? Oh,
So,
God, I have a bad feeling.
The theory is that for whatever reason, he saw those Stillinger girls and just became obsessed with them, followed them home.
Oh, fuck.
And apparently there had been reports of a man peeking through windows that day in Villisca.
Oh, God. I hate this. This makes my stomach turn.
My theory was that doesn't necessarily mean he wasn't hired by Frank. Like,
Oh,
think about
okay.
it. Frank might know this guy if he's in Methodist circles and he had been in nearby towns, and if he knew this guy was fucking off.
Right, and he, like, would do it.
And then even if he got caught, like, he was a madman.
He
so
could,
they
like,
would-
be like, I don't know at all what he's talking about.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I don't have any basis for that.
I think that is very interesting. That's definitely possible. I mean, I really think it's this guy.
Right.
Whether or not he just decided to do it on his own or if he was hired by someone, I don't know.
Well, a few years later, an even more damning turn, in 1914, Kelly was living in the town of Winter, South Dakota, where he put out an ad looking for a, quote, girl stenographer.
Come on.
A girl named Jessamy Hodgson inquired about the job, and apparently Kelly responded to her with a letter that was so lewd that when she took him to court, the judge wouldn't even read the letter out loud because it was so offensive.
Oh my God, that is fucking funny.
So even if he didn't do these murders, the guy's a piece of shit.
Oh my God.
It wasn't until 1917.
Wait, hold on. We gotta kind of break this down. This man asked, put out an ad for an employee.
Yep.
He gets someone's resume, and he in turn sends some after dark sexy fanfic
Yeah.
to her. I mean,
if you could send a photo, he would have sent a dick pic if it was possible.
and the judge literally wouldn't even read it. That's incredible. I mean, it's terrible. Like, I hate this man, and like, that's unacceptable to do, but it's just so insane. I just can't even believe it, but it's real.
So it wasn't until 1917 that Kelly was finally brought to court over this connection to the Villisca murders.
Okay.
And at first, it looked like they had him. He had been seen taking bloody clothes to a nearby laundry in a nearby town of Macedonia, Iowa. And of course, the couple we talked about that saw him, who mentioned him mentioning these murders before the bodies were even
Right.
discovered. To top it all off, Kelly even signed a confession during interrogation.
Oh.
Here is a quote from Kelly himself. "Children have always bothered me. A voice called and said there would be a light, and there was a light, just like the Bible said there was a light. When I went upstairs, a voice said, 'Suffer them to come to me, and I said, Lord, now they are coming. Then I went downstairs. I killed the children downstairs too, when the voice commanded me to. I speak 7 languages and understood the Lord when he told me to slay utterly. Every time I preached on that text, I felt like doing it. I thought I was Christ. I never killed anybody but the Moore family. If the Lord should say again, make the way clear for Christ, I should have to kill again. I am part of Christ. I followed the shadow into the house and saw the light. The Lord said, suffer the little children, and I said, yes, Lord, they are coming. The children came first, and the Lord wants them to come first. I wanted to go back to my room, but it seemed like a voice said, more yet, and I killed the other 2 children.
Can I say something? I could be wrong, but I don't think that Jesus is, for lack of a better word, his vibe. I don't think his vibe was really about killing children. You know, I don't really know where...
True.
I don't know where these people get that idea. If you think, or if you hear a voice that says, I am Jesus and you should kill those kids, I'm going to tell you, 9 times out of 10, that's not Jesus.
Yeah.
That's someone else or just some other situation. And I recommend that you don't kill the children.
Just to put a little spotlight on how wacky this dude was, as if we didn't already know, apparently Kelly returned to the crime scene just a week after the incident, pretending to be from Scotland Yard, and this sounds stupid.
Oh my God.
But the people working the crime scene were so dumb, they bought it and gave him a tour of the house and the crime scene.
No, you guys.
He pretended to be from Scotland Yard.
They should have known better. Why would someone from Scotland Yard be there?
Well, later he would recant this confession, and in fact, that elderly couple that he saw at the train station would change their story as well.
Oh.
He was tried twice. The first jury was a hung jury, 11-1 in favor of not indicting him. And then, of course, the second jury let him free. And it should also be noted that there is another theory that neither Frank or Kelly were involved, even though they were shit people.
Right.
There's a theory at this time, in the days before, in Illinois and a few other, there had been a string of axe murders.
Okay.
And attempted axe murders. And there's also a theory that this could have easily just been part of that one, whoever that was.
It could have just been
It could have all been the same thing. And even though these 2 guys are douchebags, maybe they just didn't do this douchebag thing. But I mean, it sounds pretty damning for Kelly, for sure.
Totally. But I mean, what is the thought, though, about it being multiple people?
I mean, that's the other thing. There's nothing to indicate that it's not.
Because that is something that could maybe make some of it make more sense or be more possible. Like, one person was committing the murder in one room and, like, the other people could, like, either commit the murders in the other rooms at the same time. So that was maybe why people weren't waking up, or maybe they were able to, like, hold them down or something. You know, I just don't know. I'm sure if someone was being held down, there'd be evidence of that. But, like, maybe the fact that there were more people there, they could, like, keep the people from waking up somehow. Or, you know, I don't know.
Yeah. Today, the Villisca house is still open. No one lives there, but there's a lot of tours and stuff, day and night tours. You can even rent the house and stay overnight.
Oh, that's spooky.
There's many, like almost every ghost show, from Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, Dead Files, they've all done Villisca house. It's a very popular location in the paranormal world. In 2014, something very freaky happened there. I just wanted to end on this note. On November 7th, 2014, a man from Wisconsin named Robert Larson was there doing an investigation with a team, and at some point during the investigation, Robert was the only one in the house. His fellow investigators started to hear him scream for help. When they rushed inside, they found him on the floor. He had suffered multiple self-inflicted stab wounds.
What?
He was in critical condition, actually had to be airlifted to get help.
So
Weird shit's still going on in that house.
So they say he stabbed himself multiple times, but like not of his own volition.
Right, he was calling for help.
Like as if he was like possessed or something?
So who knows? The article was very vague, short and very, very vague, so who knows? But lots of stuff like on Discovery Plus and whatnot you can look up if you want to look up Villisca stuff. So
yes, there are a lot of good things on there. Yeah, we love the Discovery Plus app. We were just talking to some of our friends last night who do the Bullets, Bourbon, and Karate podcast, which is a action movie podcast we highly recommend. But we were laughing with them last night because you would think we are getting paid by Discovery Plus, the amount we talk about this streaming channel and how much we like it and how much we use it. So yeah, there are a lot of great shows about this topic on Discovery Plus and I'm sure other places too. But on the TV TV show The Dead Files. For those who don't know, it's a paranormal investigation type show. They did an investigation on the Villisca house. They believe that Kelly was also involved through like some paranormal kind of investigation. They feel like that can be confirmed. But there was also, there's a medium on the show that she was saying that she felt like that it was multiple people.
Right.
Once again, that's not something that, you can necessarily prove or disprove or whatever, but I think that is something super interesting that she was able to kind of get, that there was multiple people involved in this murder, and it's fascinating. So if you guys have any theories, please let us know. DM us, just post about it, email us, anything like that.
That is going to wrap us up for the Villisca Axe Murder.
Dylan, wow, that was literally tight. Thank you for incredible research, a spooky episode, and we really, really enjoyed it. Next week...
Ooh, that's right. Let's tell them about next week.
Yes, next week we are going to do the infamous, the exciting, the devil made me do it case.
Yes, the story of the upcoming Conjuring 3 is based on it.
That's right, aka The Conjuring 3. And our episode is releasing on Friday, and the Conjuring movie will be releasing on Friday, I believe as well.
So we'll be able to compare, because obviously movies aren't always exactly like, which is fine.
Yeah,
because you got to make a good 1.5 2 hour story, and so
you got to adjust it.
Interesting to see what they use, maybe what they add, or what they choose to leave out. And then on our Patreon for next month, we're going to do a breakdown, like a spoiler cast of the movie. So it should be a lot of fun.
If you enjoy this podcast, we ask you to please leave a review, a like, a subscribe, tell a friend about it. Really, these little things really do add up. We really appreciate it.
Well, if you want to support this show, go to patreon.com/creep-street-podcast. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
I'm Maureen Bogey.
And this is Creep Street. Good night and goodbye.
Bye now.